Hello, it's JANG here with a look at the LEGO Star Wars Rey buildable action figure from The Force Awakens. At first glance, this almost, at least from the front, doesn't look like it's from this series because of how well they wrapped up the cloth section around this one. And also, I think the head just blends into the rest of the body of the thing much better than at least any of the other human-based or human-faced figures that they've made for this line. Has pretty decent coverage from the back too, especially through the arms and through the body. The backs of the legs, unfortunately, are completely exposed, which is not the norm, especially with the calves, not even putting any sort of consideration to covering of the backs of the calves. She has her staff weapon, which is mostly set up really to be used as a single-handed weapon in this particular set, which is unfortunate. I think that's kind of their primary thought with it. And no spoilers, this represents the specific handgun that she received as a gift from one of the other characters in the movie. It very clearly, replicates the overall shape and proportions of that, but just feels a little bit unfinished up towards the top. I don't know what they could have done to make it better though. This one does have an action feature built in where it can swing the right arm, hence some of the kind of focus on using the staff weapon with just a single arm does not work if you connect it to both arms. Doesn't work at all. So you can kind of have the beating over the head. You can also have the sweep up the leg. I guess that's a little bit too extreme, but just kind of get that under there, sweep up the leg, or you can do it this way, but to me, it doesn't really work all that well with a large staff weapon. I could have done without the action feature on this one because I just feel like it doesn't really integrate well with the figure's playstyle, the character's playstyle, and specifically the type of weapon. The head on this one is definitely a high point, I think. It's still using that same specific comic graphic stylization that's not intended to represent a perfect replica of the actor or actress in this case. It doesn't, it's not trying to be specifically Daisy Ridley. It is trying to specifically be Rey in this certain comic style. So they've changed up the facial features a little bit, and the eyes are dramatically larger, but I think it works well for the style they're going for. And even more than that, the overall headdress I think is done really nicely. I especially appreciate how closely matched the color of the plastic is to the armor pieces and also the wrapping of cloth around there, and how close it gets. So it starts to feel continuous. And that's something that I haven't seen on any of the other figures that they've done, where they really have not previously created that continuity between the headpiece and anything else on the body. And this has really nice molding all around it. Looks really good. Again, combining in a little bit of realism of physics of how the things wrap around, but then using that certain graphic style, which has a certain kind of minimum resolution to the level of detail and kind of accentuates edges and things. It's really nicely done. This is my favorite head that they've done so far in the large action figure series. And then one more mention for the cloth piece. It's actually one single piece. So you can see how it has kind of two fingers that get crossed across the front of the body, and then it just continues on down here. This just drapes down and flows very nicely. It's actually opened up. That's part of the cut, to actually open it up with the legs, so you can stand with the legs apart, and it still covers parts of them. And then around the back, those kind of fingers come back and then they cross and they get pinned in place here. The whole knob for the action feature sticks out awkwardly, but overall I think that they just managed the cloth very well. And you can see a little bit here of how this is actually using the newer build for these, with the newer unified upper body piece that doesn't have any ball joints on it except for the one for the head, and that does limit you, like with Kylo Ren that I already showed, limits your left to right motion. And this one just in general has a limitation of motion just because of how much bulk is used around the neck. But again, the back of this is covered up pretty nicely. This also had a couple of interesting pieces that were used deep in the build that I wasn't expecting. Brand new 3 long axle pieces in brown with stoppers on the ends, just useful new parts. With the staff weapon, I want to do this, but sadly they don't include an extra axle piece to allow you to actually do that. Not even in the spares in this set. It was really disappointing to see. You can, however, reconfigure it end to end just a little bit and leave out one of the double female connectors on there, and then you're able to actually connect this to the hands. And then you can start to experiment a little bit with more realistic poses and see just kind of what range of motion that you're able to get while keeping the hands together. And depending upon what exact pose you're trying to get, you may need to just change the connections on the hands by 90 degrees, but there you can see how it becomes useless to have the action feature once you do that. But there's some range there. It also sometimes for posing can help to move around some of the armor pieces. They got a little bit tricky and creative with how they placed the armor pieces 90 degrees away from each other to give you better coverage as viewed from most angles, but that can limit your range of motion sometimes. But I think there's a pretty respectable range to it, but it's definitely not as good as on many of the other figures. To be honest, this doesn't make a good action figure, a thing to actually play with, but it is one of the better looking figures that they've done in the line. But that brings me to a bit of a conundrum, because this is supposed to be an action figure. It's supposed to be all about play. It's supposed to be for younger kids. It's not so much of a collector's item. And I think for the price, you could get a more traditional action figure that actually has similar, if not better, articulation and much higher, collectability and display value. Good looking relative to the other Lego figures, not so good looking relative to other figures from other companies, and kind of low on the play value this time around. Let me know your thoughts by leaving a comment down below if you'd like to. That would be very much appreciated, especially if you have thoughts to one side or the other, liking or disliking compared to my kind of middle of the road summary. Thanks in advance for your feedback, and I'll talk to you again soon.